Thank you, IUS, and thank you, Richa, for the wonderful instruction course that you have designed. So I'll be talking about glaucoma secondary to PK and VR surgery. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir. Audible and seen.
Okay, thank you. So there are no financial disclosures. So these are the topics in which I'll be covering up my two parts of the talk. The first one is a post-PK glaucoma. Now, there are certain conditions which may predispose or have risk factors for developing these sort of glaucomas, which may include aphakic or pseudophakic bullous keratopathy, grafting and repeat grafting, a pre-existing glaucoma, that is a glaucoma that is there even before you try a PK, and in certain situations such as post-perforation, infective, ICE syndromes, and trauma. But these two things are very interrelated to each other. Penetrating keratoplasty in itself can cause glaucoma, and glaucoma in itself can cause a need for a repeat PK because of failure of the graft. So these two things are interrelated to each other. The incidence is quite high. It's around 9 to 35% with a high risk of graft failure with glaucoma. You can see that it increases from 11% to around 58% in case both medications and glaucoma surgery have been done in this study. What is the pathophysiology for this? A distortion of the angle with a collapse of the trabecular meshwork. So there is a possible, there's a whole collapse of the trabecular meshwork, which can happen, and that causes a raised intraocular pressure. There are certain conditions which can cause it, including a suturing, which may be long bites, tight sutures, as you can see a large graft in the picture, inflammation, a very prolonged use of steroids, peripheral angiosynechia, and a pre-existing glaucoma, as I have discussed. But it's a challenge to measure the intraocular pressure after a PK because of the distortion, the astigmatism, the scarring, and the flattening of the cornea. So in case it is possible, you can do an apprehension tonometry. In case it is not, have a tonopen or an eye care. And sometimes what helps is the peripheral rim of the cornea. So in case you're not able to check it, you can possibly use the tonopen and check from the peripheral intact rim of the host cornea and try to see whether you can get some readings out of the tonopen, and document the angles in the optic nerve head whenever the condition permits, and keep in mind that epithelial and strobal edema may itself cause a falsely low IOP readings, especially in the initial postoperative phases. Medical management remains the same, except be a little more cautious in the use of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors because of the risk for corneal decompensation in these situations when you find that the cornea is already weak. Trabeculectomy and glaucoma drainage devices are the preferred surgery. Trabeculectomy is fraught with failures, and the glaucoma drainage devices have a high risk for graft failure if they are placed into the anterior chamber. So the other options, in case you are able to do it, is a placing into the pars plana or the sulcus. So I'll give you an example of a 69-year-old male that had a cataract surgery around 6 years back in both the eyes and came with a left eye deep stromal infiltrate with hypopyon, and was planned for a therapeutic PK in the left eye. With initial spikes of pressures and 2 months pressures of 22 on 3 medications, finally at 4 months his pressures rose to 52 on maximum medications with astazolamide. Graft was clear at this point, and he was planned for a tube into the sulcus in the left eye. This is a picture, and you can see the tube behind the iris there. This is a 3-year post-op picture, and the pressure is around 13 with a 618 vision and a clear graft, and the disc is healthy in these eyes. How it's not that easy in all these situations. This is another patient who has a decompensated sort of graft, and in this situation I had to put up a tube into the sulcus. It's difficult to insert the tube into the correct plane, and it took a lot of effort to actually put this tube into a correct place in this surgery. Trabeculectomy is possible. However, we have to have a mobile conjunctiva. We have to use mitomycin C when you're doing trabeculectomy. Have a deep anterior chamber, and there should be no the peripheral anterior synechia to the graft host junction. There are certain issues including scarring at the limbus from previous surgeries, the PAs which may preclude a surgery, and a shallow anterior chamber may itself cause an endothelial cell loss after a PK is done. Sometimes it is possible to go for a sequential surgery. So this patient came with a road traffic accident and a spontaneous lens extrusion. And you can see a triradiate tear, and the patient underwent a primary repair. And after a few months, he started having his pressures were increasing and they were not under control, and underwent aniridia intraocular lens and Ahmed valve implant in the same sitting. And his pressures were okay, so around 12 on single medication. The vision improved to 624. The vision was less because of the central scar that was there. And he was fairly okay for the next couple of years. But finally, when his vision started dropping again, he underwent a penetrating keratoplasty, and his vision improved to 6/9 with the pressures of 14. You can't see the tube tip at this point in this picture because I have trimmed the tube during the PK surgery, and you can see a fairly well functioning bleb. So IP control prior to a penetrating keratoplasty is what is necessary. Cyclodestruction may have its own role, but because of the increased risk of inflammation, hypotony, graft failure, and loss of vision, it is reserved for certain eyes. Therefore, in PK, a surgical treatment is tailored to an individual patient, and control of pre-existing glaucoma prior to any PK is what is important. Now, I come to my second part of my talk, which is post-VR surgery glaucoma. When you're talking about post-VR surgery, we may be talking about scleral buckles, pars plana vitrectomy, or intravitreal gas or oil injections. So once you are using a scleral buckle, it mainly causes a vortex vein compression, which causes ciliary body edema and causing an anterior shift of the lens iris diaphragm, which may cause an angle closure glaucoma. Pars plana vitrectomy itself means it does not, without even a silicone oil or without any other procedures, only a plain pars plana vitrectomy may itself cause glaucoma because of an oxidative damage to the trabecular meshwork, which may happen in 15 to 20% because of the movement of the oxygen radicals and damaging the trabecular meshwork. In addition to PPV, injection of intravitreal gas and oil, especially oil, which may cause an increasing incidence of glaucoma with time, say it's around 2.2% at 6 months to 56% at 8 months. And that may also be a reason why you may have glaucoma developing after a VR surgery. But are these two things related to each other, glaucoma and retinal detachment? Are they actually related to each other, and why are they related? It's because both of them may be associated with myopia. So we know that glaucoma may be associated with myopia, and we know that retinal detachment may be associated with myopia. So some of the studies have actually found out a link between a glaucoma and a retinal detachment, even in patients who have not undergone a retinal detachment surgery. The pathophysiology may be different, and some of them have already been explained. It may include a not very well functioning trabecular meshwork after trauma. It may be a physical obstruction of the trabecular meshwork by means of oil or blood. It may be because of steroid-induced intraocular pressure rise. Maybe because of volume expansion, because of an overfilling. So sometimes your overzealous retina colleagues may overfill the silicone oil or the gas, and you have to forewarn them. Inflammation, which may cause a synechia and an angle closure, or sometimes the gas and the oil may actually push the iris and lens anteriorly, causing a pupillary block and obstruction of the trabecular meshwork. So we have to look into the pathophysiology. But whenever you're looking at a picture, don't miss the oil. That's what your retina colleagues are likely to do. So he has a pseudophakic patient, and you can see that oil shimmers there. And if you look closely, you'll be able to see the meniscus there as pointed by the red arrows. So sometimes these patients are sent up by the retina colleagues, and they'll say that retina is fully attached and everything's fine. The pressure is 50. You don't know what is the reason. You have to find out what is the reason, and you have to look at the reasons there. Sometimes they are very, very subtle. So in this case, there is a phakic patient, and you can see that even in this situation, there's a post-trauma eye, and you can see the silicone oil into the anterior chamber. But if you don't look at it carefully, this may actually be missed out. The post-silicone oil injection, because of the zonular weakness and there is some laxity there, the oil has actually seeped anteriorly and has caused a pupillary block in this situation. So the treatment depends on the cause. In case there is an overfill, we may need to remove the gas, have a gas tap, have a proper positioning of the patient, or possibly do a PI. In case it is required, we may need to do removal of the oil or surgical or a laser or surgical PI. So treatment is addressing the cause. What is the cause for that? In case there's an overfill of the gas, we may need to have a partial removal of the gas as told. Tight scleral buckle, we may need to loosen it. Or we may require a partial removal of silicone oil from the anterior chamber in case there is an overfill and there is filling into the anterior chamber. In case of steroid-induced intraocular pressure rise, we may need to add the patients on anti-glaucoma medications. Medical treatment remains fairly the same. I'm not going to details, but be a little careful about prostaglandin analogs because of the risk avoiding active inflammations or CMEs, and patients usually may require a short course of systemic acetazolamide. There are certain issues with trabeculectomy in these situations, and these include a conjunctival scarring from buccal. As you can see in the picture, a lot of scarring there and a lot of subconjunctival silicone oil there. A prior surgery such as vitrectomy and cataract surgery, anterior segment neovascularization, residual emulsified silicone oil, and chronic inflammation. So these are certain issues with trabeculectomy. Trabeculectomy can also be combined with silicone oil, but you know the success rates are limited, and you may need to resort to certain measures such as needlings and 5FU injections even after the surgery, because you know that these trabeculectomy is likely to fail and as compared to any other normal persons. So in certain situations, we need to think about going for a tube implant, especially in case there is a scarring or there is a high risk of failure of your conventional trabeculectomy. There's an example of a 10-year-old boy with a microcornea, one-eyed, pressure is around 54, and because of the multiple ports, you can see all those staphylomas at all those ports which are coming out. Pressure is around 54, and with the advanced glaucoma, he's one-eyed. So So at this point, it's not possible to do a trabeculectomy, conventional surgery, and therefore I resorted to do a Ahmed valve implant in this, and the valve was placed into the vitreous cavity through the pars plana, as you can see. And you can see that wiggling tip of the tube behind the iris when I'm trying to shake it. So this is the tube tip just behind the iris, which is showing a little wiggle there. So over a course of time, these staphylomas have come down. They are not resolved fully, but they have come down, and the pressure is around 12 with a vision of around 4/60 and a well-functioning lab. Ahmed valves can also be used inferiorly. This is a post-silicone oil removal, and there is still a lot of residual emulsified oil, and I resorted to an inferior valve in this situation. Post-buckle remains a challenge because, and you can see that the buckle, the belt buckle there, you can see with the red arrow, and it's quite anterior. So it's not possible for me to do a trabeculectomy here, and therefore I resorted to a valve implant. Valve was placed into the posterior cavity, and you can see the well-functioning bleb, and I've covered it with a corneal graft so that the cosmetic appearance appears a little better. So sometimes we can suture the valve also to the belt buckle in case you're not finding the space in that situation. Sometimes when the situation is very bad and you're not able to do anything, transscleral cyclophotocoagulation may be of use, but they are usually reserved for eyes with poor visual acuity because of the risk for hypotony and visual effects. But they are sometimes useful as an adjunct to functioning aquashunt. So sometimes just want the pressures to come down a little and there is no other way you can do it. So they may be used in certain eyes as a last resort. So glaucoma, we always show that whether it's a post-PKI or it's a post-VR surgery, glaucoma may actually be pre-existent. We may be noting it post-operatively, but may be pre-existent. And a pre-operative evaluation and surgical planning is a must for these complicated glaucomas, and always counsel on limitations for any of these surgeries.